I had a grandmother who grew up in something we would today call polite society. I mean, people back then, she still referred to the couch as the Chesterfield, and so these were people who grew up in a different era, and they had a lot of respect for institutions that perhaps started to wane in the 1960s, and in many cases, we've never restored some of that. But some places, culture is still. I was just talking with Dan Tom from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department about a travel writer who said this area, she was referring to Ogden, but let's face it, the culture here is pretty much duplicate, is like the 1950s, that things never changed. First of all, welcome back to the program.
Hey, it's great to be back. I'm
I,
happy.
I was going to say,
It's warm in here.
yeah. Yeah, tomorrow morning's going to be chilly
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Uh, we were just talking off air about how, when it comes to law enforcement, there aren't too many people who sneer at you in the Twin Falls area, in the Magic Valley.
I don't get that one finger salute very often,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I really wanted to talk about today as we were talking off air is just to thank this community. And I tell you what, this is the best place for law enforcement. One of the best places in the U.S. I think you can work. I've been doing it for about 22 years or something like that. And I've just watched things over the years. And when I first got in, it was about 1994. Rodney King was in 1991, 92. And so there was a huge scrutiny on law enforcement, and even with my brother, he just was nasty in regards to like, cops and how cops would be so evil and vindictive, and we've had to play that over the years. As far as play, I shouldn't say play that. We've had to watch that over the years because from the 60s, that law enforcement changed. 1960s, with many people coming back from Vietnam, some from North Korea, or sorry, from Korea, and everything changed. It was a hometown thing, and then it became law enforcement became a military thing, and so it was a lot more based on military, and we went away from that beat kind of transition, where law enforcement would know you. There's Jimmy's son. I'm gonna give him a swat on the backside and send him home and tell him, don't be doing that again. If you did that now in law enforcement, oh my gosh, the lawsuits would line up. Okay,
Yeah.
and so that 60s and 70s changed that, and then when we got into the 80s, communities started to really distrust law enforcement because it was the great power, the great evil man up there, and law enforcement started to see that, and we wanted to get this thing called community policing, which really is interacting with the community, and it's really not a change. It's just what we did in the 50s,
Hmm.
as you were saying, and so we're trying to focus on that in the 80s and 90s, and then videotape came out. And everything we do, I mean, literally, if I make a traffic stop, I know I'm being recorded from at least one to two or three cameras. And so, the scrutiny is even greater. If I said something evil to somebody, and I offended somebody this last week, and I got a complaint on it. If I said something that was inappropriate, oh my gosh, they look at you, and people will scrutinize you. But the thing in this valley, I just don't see that. I don't see people coming down on us. They
Hmm.
understand it's a job. It's a tough job that we do because we have to deal with people that aren't always the most pleasant, or they're in this situation where it's the worst part of their life and you show up. And so I'm just letting everybody know Twin Falls Sheriff's Office really appreciates this community and what you guys have done for us.
It's a perception thing too, because when I was working in Delaware, there was a small town on the other side of the county where I lived called Laurel, and I got an email from a guy telling me that he felt that local police, had been abusive to him in a traffic stop, and so I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not there. So he sent me a videotape. Again, they videotaped it while they were in the car.
Right.
I get the videotape and I'm looking at it, and they said to the policeman, "We're videotaping this traffic stop." And he said, "Oh, okay." And he just kept talking and saying, "I got to check this." And in other words, he understood that, and he wasn't upset about it. In fact, he just said, "Well, okay," and went about his job. Later on, it turned out the guy had been a drug runner, and obviously he was just looking to score a few points because he got pulled over,
Yeah.
and he got arrested by somebody else not long after that. But it's that perception that, somebody said one time, these young kids go to these demonstrations and they figure, if that the policeman's not supposed to push back if they push him. Well, the policeman is trained to not only push back, but then to stop you from pushing back. So you've got to use a little greater force than just
Right.
equal force.
Right. And when it comes to perception of what we have to do to arrest somebody, we have to use the force necessary to effect arrest. That's the way the law is written in the state of Idaho. And I've been on many. I couldn't even tell you how many fights I've been in regards to that. And it's not that I'm going to beat a guy down. It's I need to make that arrest. I need to place everybody in safety in the safety situation. And I can be just as tough as I need to be at the situation, or I can be just as gentle as I need to be. And I think we in law enforcement and the sheriff's office, I'm speaking for us, we have some great people, that have really reached out and gone that extra mile for that.
Can you stick around for the next segment
Sure.
today?
Yeah.
Because I've got a couple of other law enforcement things I want to mention, and of course, maybe some traffic issues too that we're still dealing
Oh
with.
dear. Yes.
So I was just telling him how my driving habits have suddenly regressed to I'm 16 all over again this winter. We'll talk about that coming up in a few minutes. It's 8:39. We've got a break in just a moment. It's 22 right now, and just wanted to remind folks about my friends at Waddell and Reed here in Twin Falls. And look, I'm just thinking about this. I technically could retire in 7 years. I'm probably going to keep working just because I like it. But a lot of you folks may be thinking about these things, and you're much younger than I am, and you should be. Waddell and Reed has been around since 1937, and over the last 80 years have become one of the oldest firms to offer mutual funds. In fact, Waddell and Reed offers two mutual fund families. They invest with a conservative nature. Waddell and Reed, they know what they're doing, and they take a more planning approach and look at each piece of the puzzle for each client. And Waddell and Reed will help build proper expectations and build those plans around your needs and goals. Waddell and Reed helps people manage money, and Waddell and Reed takes planning personally. We've got more with Dan Tom from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department on the way in just a moment. It's 23. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We have a guest joining us in studio. Dan Tom is with the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department, and he joins us, about 3 times a month. I think it's
Yeah.
about 3 times a
Whenever you
month.
let me.
Yes, door's always open. It's 8:43, and we've got 23. You're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you this morning. Story on the AP wire this morning says that because we've had increasing pressures, a lot of people, Captain Miller told me a few months ago that if he had to do it again, going back 30 years, he might not get into law enforcement today because it's gotten so difficult and the pressures and the media looking at everything you do and the almost an over scrutinization. But there's another reason it makes it more difficult to recruit people as well, is because we're surrounded by a number of states now that have at least some legalization to a degree of marijuana. And if someone has smoked marijuana while they were in college and they come and apply for a job in Idaho, maybe they were living in Washington State or Oregon or Colorado, it becomes very difficult for them to actually pass muster here.
Yeah, in the state of Idaho, our state statute, I'm not the statute, our state rulings are saying if you've smoked marijuana in the last 3 years, you can't apply for law enforcement or you won't be able to be accepted. And so like you said, we're an island in the Sea of Green, surrounds us except for Wyoming. So yeah, we have that new culture that we have to kind of bring in and figure out how we're going to deal with this. I mean, just because somebody smoked up a doobie a year ago, does that make them, a bad guy? If it was illegal in that state, in the mentality they're thinking probably no, I'm not. I'm just doing what's legal. And so, even though it's federally mandated that it's marijuana's illegal. Okay, put it that way. Okay, the states have allowed that, and they're not enforcing it, and wherever the directions are going with it, we still have to learn how to deal with the cultural part of it. So that's what we're doing. Is I didn't know that when you were saying that. I'm kind of surprised, but also glad to see because there's a lot of young people that get disqualified because of that.
And the legislature's thinking about dropping it from 3 years to a year,
Yeah.
and which would at least increase the pool of prospective candidates.
Right. I think it will. I truly think it will because in college, there's some, when I do a lot of speaking and I go to a Rotary Club or something, I said, does anybody remember what marijuana smells like? Just think about your college days. I mean, we're talking people that are 70, 80, 90 years old. And, in the 70s and 80s, it was like an open up a bathroom door and the smoke rolls out kind of thing. And so marijuana has been around for a while. It's become culturally more accepted all the time. And so we have to start to learn how to deal with that within law enforcement. And, I don't want to ever see us legalize it in Idaho. Personally, I don't want to see it.
Right, me too.
But I think the future's looking that way within the next 10 years, probably, because I think the state will see, oh, look at the money we can make on that. And so, anyway, that's Dan Tom's. That's not the sheriff's office. That's Dan Tom's talking. But anyway, I think we're going to see open it up because it's hard to get young people to apply.
We've got a caller with us. Caller, you're on the air with Dan Tom from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department at 8:45. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, this is kind of a change of subject, but it's very, very important. We have the major amount of elk and deer in the North Country and around that's really in bad shape right now. And we're trying to put together some sort of a package to get to feed them and take care of them. I know all the things the Fish and Game says about it. I'm a lifetime member and a corporate head of SFW, so I know all the rules. But when something's hungry, I think the general public should step up to the plate. If they like to look at the big game, the elk, the deer, I've got friends in the North Country right now that's feeding them, and you've got the Fish and Game up there with their opinion. The biologist wants to not feed them. They want to let them fare for themselves. Well, right now, you folks out there that's listening to this, all your baby fawns have died. They are not feeding them. And the standard rule for all the feeding stations is once they got to 18 inches of snow, they were supposed to start feeding them. They're not. They're just starting to address it now in 5 and 6 feet of snow.
Well, I thank you for the call. And speaking of that, I just got a message last night from a woman in Bliss. So not too far away from here that there's a massive herd that's making it home now.
Huge herd.
Now,
yeah.
From your perspective, too, the issue with this is when they come down out of the mountains, they get in the roads.
Yeah.
And that's another serious threat.
And because the plows are moving stuff, and so they can get to the grass. Yeah, it is a very serious threat. And so, I have some friends in Chalice that told me they literally are pushing elk out of their yard all the time.
Now, I know that we don't use a lot of salt on the roads here, but in some states where they do, they come down, they lick that salt alongside the road, so they're always there.
Yeah.
But if they're now roaming in large numbers near Bliss and they're trying to drive them out of Sun Valley, Ketchum area too, then we're not far away from that. And if this winter continues like this, we may start seeing larger numbers here.
I'll tell you, about 6 years ago, a lot of your listeners will remember this, is over between the Oasis on 84 and Jerome's exit. There was hundreds, if not thousands, of deer there, and we were getting deer hits almost on a daily, if not hourly basis over there. And so that does happen when we have a winter like this. It does push them down, and I know Fish and Game would love to address that in regards to how we can help out. But I understand the management idea behind it. I'm not saying I agree with it. I just understand the management idea behind it.
We have seen, though, I think a big increase already in the number of hits of wild animals over the last month anyway.
Oh, yeah, because they're hungry and they're moving. So.
Yeah, and so, when I was driving back from, I think it was Idaho Falls a few weeks ago, and it was already foggy out in the morning, and it was still dark, and I was driving back, and I see this sign flashing, beware of elk.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of other traffic, so I dropped, I wasn't driving at 80 anyway that time of morning, but I dropped down to 58, and I kept it to 58 all the way to Pocatello because, once again, I didn't want to hit something that large, driving a new car at the time too as well.
Well, the important thing, I did a little blog on this last week in regards to speed. That's probably one of our most important pieces of equipment in our car, is that speedometer. Because if you slow down, you can avoid so many things.
Right.
You can stop better. You can avoid interaction with elk, deer, cows. Oh, they'll mess up a car. They'll mess up people.
Yeah.
So that speed limit or that speedometer is so important. If you can, you said 58. I'm not sure why you used 58, but
I felt comfortable there.
That's dropping your speed like that. Your travel of every second, you travel so many feet every second. When you drop it down, it really brings it a lot lower as far as your reaction time too.
Speed's in the 50s, and I'll tell you, because when I was first driving, we were still having we still on the interstates had that national 55.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then New York was one of the last states to actually let it go. And when I was driving there and working there for many years, in upstate New York, if you were on the thruway, they went to 65, and it's still there. I mean, they've never raised it above that. And so in wintertime, I was never driving above 60. And I had a weatherman that I worked with at one of my TV stations who said he even drove in the 50s, upper 50s on the interstate, even in the summer. He just never felt comfortable punching it above 60.
Yeah.
And, people behind you may not like it, but that's why there's a passing lane in that situation.
That's right. Remember, most of the old cars have a big red circle and that 50 mile mark. Yeah, if you remember that. I've had a few of those cars.
Yeah. I had a Buick LeSabre that, well, of course, the way that thing ran, you could barely get it to 50.
Yeah.
By the time I wore it out.
The speed is a real big difference on this ice. It's just, if you slow down, even you were talking about spinning out in your car, and you got a 4-wheel drive vehicle, even spinning out. Lowering your speed, that your spin out will still happen probably, but you're going to have a lot more control in it. You just can't beat that. So
the other thing too is, and I mentioned this to you off air, coming up on an intersection, and I was, well below the speed limit this morning on the way to work, and then I could spot a car coming up Falls Avenue and knew that light was going to trip and go red when that car. I had figured this out driving Washington Street in the morning. If there's not a lot of other traffic early in the morning, really early in the morning, you can catch everything just about green. But on the other hand, because it's a main thoroughfare through town, But if somebody else is coming up on one of the side streets, that light will change.
Yeah, they have the
It's
sensors up there. They
right.
can
It's
see
for
it.
efficiency,
Yeah.
and it's a good idea. But as I saw that car coming, I decided to brake, but I was trying not to hit the brakes hard,
Hmm.
and still I got a little fishtailing as I. And I'm not worried about going into the intersection. I'm more worried about the guy coming the other way who may not have seen me as I saw
Yeah.
him. And so this is really a critical thing we should keep in mind.
And I'll speak to that right at that because when I teach my kids to drive, and they were mostly good drivers, when I teach my kids to drive, and I am also a driving instructor for law enforcement, one of the things that we look at is driving 12 seconds ahead. That's a long ways when you think about if you next time you're in your car right now, pick a point out and count how many seconds that is. 12 seconds ahead gives you the ability to react way before it even endangers you. Like you're talking about in that intersection, you saw that coming. You were looking farther ahead. That's where most of our accidents happen because people are looking at the end of their hood or their phone, one of the two. I'm not sure. And
Yes.
and they're just not looking far enough ahead. You can avoid so many collisions, ice. You can avoid a lot just by looking farther ahead. And so that's a great tip that I'd love to put out there is that look further ahead, slow down. I mean, you can't. Those are the things that will just change the way you drive.
Our guest is Dan Tom. He's joining us from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department. We're at 8:52, and if you'd like to reach him with a comment or question, give us a call at 736-0300. That's 736-0300. 24 right now. That may be the high for today. It's not going to get a lot warmer than that. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story this morning. The other aspect of this, when I'm on the interstate, and I'll never forget someone telling me you would like about 3 seconds between automobiles, but that was when I was driving in those 65 mile
Yeah,
per hour
55.
zones.
Yeah.
So I would pick a mile marker or something along the road, and I would try to count off my distance.
Hmm.
But if you're driving at 80 on the interstate, 3 seconds may not be enough of a
That's
gap.
way too close. You should be about 2 seconds for every 10 miles an hour. I mean, realistically, you want to give a lot of distance because if something happens at 80 miles an hour, and I don't have the sheet right in front of me. We're doing about 125 feet a second. So you think about it, it takes three-quarters of a second to react, to get to your brake, and then the braking time. It's a long stopping distance at 80 miles an hour or 85 miles an hour. So just looking that far ahead and giving more distance. My wife is oftentimes digging into my arm because I'm driving a little closer than I should be in the front of with somebody behind. Sorry, the other way around. I'm behind somebody, and she just reminds me, yeah, because sometimes I get in a hurry. Why we're in a hurry, I have no idea, but we are as Americans. We just kind of get in a hurry to go somewhere.
And well, when I'm coming back, even on a clear sunny day and it's dry out, and I pass Mountain Home, and then I'm my way down the highway. You come around that big bend, and of course, I thought about it one day. You've got that retainer wall built
Oh
there,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and as I'm coming around it, I don't really know what's ahead. If someone had a breakdown around that bend, and I come winding around there at 80 miles per hour, I don't have any time to stop.
Yeah, that one I agree with that one because I always slow down on that no matter what I'm doing. That one just kind of creeps me out. That whole retaining wall on the river on the right hand side as you're going
So
eastbound.
we might want to, at least in those moments, drop the speed down a little bit
Yeah,
until we clear that corner and can see ahead.
I can't stress it enough. Watching your speed is probably one of the most critical things you can do when you're driving. Because if your speeds are slower, again, the reaction time, the stopping time, the whole thing changes by 5 miles an hour even. When you start looking at if you were going 35 to 45 and a child runs out in front of
Hmm.
you, that is the difference of stopping in time. That 10 miles an hour, you can stop that much faster. And so that's why we have speed limits. I mean, is because to keep the community safe in regards to other traffic and other people on the road.
Other thought I had the other day, I was driving on Washington Street going north, and because of the snow, people were walking along this in the street
Oh,
because they couldn't get on the
on the
sidewalk.
sidewalks, yeah, nobody's scooped the sidewalks off.
So walking or driving along, I'm a little concerned because there's some give in that road
Yeah,
when I'm driving, and even if I'm not going very fast, and all of a sudden I hit an icy patch and I fishtail, I'm going to take that guy out
yeah,
walking along the street.
yeah. I had I've been laid up for a little bit for a surgery I had on my hand, and so I've been out walking a lot every day. And I have to walk on the street because nobody has shoveled their sidewalks, and so it is a lot more dangerous. So you just have to, that whole idea of just being cautious about where your car's placed on the road too.
Got a couple of minutes before the end of the hour, but the other part that got me, Ada County had a big snowfall one day last week, and so we've been through this now for several weeks. I mean, it takes a few days to get your driving skills back when you first get ice and snow on the roads, but they had 68, I think 68 accidents in like a couple of hours. and it was overwhelming, I think, to first responders
Oh
because.
yeah.
But how long is it going to take people to get their winter driving skills back after a
It,
good month of
it'll
this?
take till April. I think some of it is, I've watched this over the years. The first snow we drive like slow as we can. Okay, we're really cautious. The second snow we're a little, and by the third or fourth snow we're driving like it's just like normal, and we get more complacent in regards to our speed and our everything else. And so every year, matter of fact, somebody posted on Facebook today, don't people ever learn from last year? And I went, no, they don't. We don't learn. Even myself, I get going faster than I probably should be going, and I need to slow down. So just keeping that idea.
Every couple of days we seem to get a couple of inches of snow as well, and every morning there's ice left over from the meltdown the day before.
Yeah, and that's that first 4 or 5 hours in the morning. That's probably the one that is one of the most critical times. That one day that we had that really horrible wind blowing and snow and stuff, we had over 80 slide offs
Wow.
in our county, and I don't even know what the whole valley. We have our Circom manages five counties. I bet you there was a couple hundred in that 10-hour period. And we were overwhelmed. Yeah, we were absolutely overwhelmed.
I'm going to buy stock in a body shop somewhere.
I was just thinking that same thing this morning. I said, this is a good time for tow truck drivers and body men. They're making money.
that and sand,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of that being spread around.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for coming by today. And, when we don't get a chance normally to ask you, when people are listening and if they have a comment or question but can't phone in and they want to talk to you or somebody at the office later, how do they go about doing that?
Well, you know what? We do have a Facebook page, and I'll encourage people to get on that because I try to answer. That's one of my jobs, and I try to answer those as much as I can. And if I can't answer them, I will get to the people that can answer those questions. And if you want to call the office, talk to me, 736 4110 736 4110. If you just need to talk with Sergeant Tom in regards to any questions or things that we can do for you or in the public.
See, when you switched with Ken, we stopped seeing all those Zion National Park photographs. No, that was his personal Facebook. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We want to thank you for coming by. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Have a great week.
Dan Tom joining us this morning. News is coming up next at 9 o'clock from Fox. One more hour of Top Story ahead with Bill Colley. It's 23 right now on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. A couple of things I'm going to add in the next hour. We've got to talk a little bit about some environmental issues, also something called the Trans-Pacific Partnership and what's the future of that potential deal after the moves made by President Trump this week.